What's up, guys? Welcome to the podcast, guys, with Rob and Nando. We are going to get into another topic today. Before we do so, make sure you subscribe to the channel. We are on the road to 1,000 subscribers, so help us out. Support the channel. We're giving a lot of gold and a lot of what we have in store for you coming up. So help us out. Subscribe to the channel. Support us. We are here for you, and we are here for the long run. So we are going to get into today's topic. Today's topic is conflicts in a relationship. So what type of conflicts do couples run into when it comes to their own personal relationships?
Yeah, conflicts, different arguments in a relationship. They can happen for different reasons. I would say some common ones are jealousy, needs or expectations not being met. Sometimes it could be a matter of control. Women sometimes just get emotional. I mean, there's going to be times where women are just going to argue with you because they need it. You know, that's one of the differences between men and women is women sometimes need that emotional stimulation. But the good news is most of those conflicts could be resolved. So we're going to go over that today.
Yeah, some that come to mind as well are, and can be some harsh realities dealt with within those conflicts, and that is abusive relationships, money issues that can lead to breakups and divorces for anybody that's married, and being unfaithful, cheating. And that's huge. Intimacy, if there's no intimacy involved within the relationship, that's a conflict. So that's a big issue right there. And how do you see things changing with regards to, well, couples sit down, they talk it over. How can they fix these conflicts? How can they work towards a resolution?
Well, the first thing I'll tell you is with women especially, when there's a conflict, they will rarely ever be direct and tell you what it is. You'll notice something's off because they might go cold on you or give you an attitude or flip out or something like that. So the first thing is you have to first identify that something's going on, that there's an issue, and I would address it. Sit down, talk about it, and first find out what it is that's causing that conflict. That's step number one. And then I think that step two is to sit down and have a discussion about it, because I would say 99% of these type of conflicts can be resolved with just sitting down and having a conversation.
So what causes those conflicts between partners, couples,
well, I'll tell you this.
Couples?
I think a lot of this comes down to communication. I think a lot of the times when couples argue and like you said, it could be a divorce or the relationship takes a break or somebody cheats, it gets to that extent sometimes. It's a lack of communication, and that's a result of like passive aggressive behavior, ignoring each other, things like that. So that's why it's so important to like identify that something's going on, and then even if you have to sit down and have that awkward conversation with her, sit down and figure out what it is and talk it out.
Do you think some causes can also be incompatible needs, some extreme emotional reactions, especially because women are emotional? Men are not typically showing their emotions, but women can bring it out of them, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. The reality is you're not going to be able to resolve every conflict, but if it's like one of the things we mentioned before, where it's like lack of intimacy or misunderstanding, or maybe she feels that like one of her needs weren't met, whether it's emotional or like you said you were going to do something but you didn't, or cleaning the house or whatever. I mean, with women, the conflict could be over anything. You have to sit down and you have to sit down, be understanding about it, be open about it. And I think another key thing with communication is like if she's explaining what's going on, you have to sit down and listen. Probably listen more than talk, and then try to understand it. And then ask yourself like, okay, don't place blame. That's one thing I want to kind of throw in there before we continue. Is like, I think a mistake people make is like they'll start discussing what the problem is. They'll start off right, but then where they ruin it is they start throwing blame. Well, you always do this. Well, you're talking about me. Well, what about what you do? And that's not how you resolve a conflict. You have to kind of sit down, figure out what it is, ask her what it is, and then look. Sometimes it's better to just say, "Hey, my bad. I made a mistake," and resolve it that way.
Before we get into more of the resolving the conflicts, let's get into more of what can occur. We talked about unhealthy situations that causes conflicts, unhealthy conflicts that occur. Is there such thing as a healthy conflict within a relationship, partnership, marriage?
You know, it's an interesting question. To be honest with you, I think an unhealthy relationship are those ones where there's a couple that's been dating for a few years and they never argue or they never have any disagreements. That's like to me, it's like a strange sign, like a red flag, like something's up.
That's pretty odd. It's
very odd.
It's a little scary actually, because like, it's something that could be growing as far as the conflict causing both sides or one side to be upset versus the other, and it just grows, and then all of a sudden both of them or that one person explodes.
Yeah, 100%. It could definitely be boiled up emotions. But you asked like, is there such thing as a healthy conflict? I think honestly, conflicts in general with relationships are absolutely healthy to have, because it's you're identifying and communicating through an issue. Look at it that way.
So you're saying the conflict itself and discussing it is a healthy conflict?
Yeah, I think that's a healthy part of relationships in general. What's not healthy is, like I said before, when if you have an issue with your girlfriend or boyfriend, if you're watching this right now and you don't discuss it and you engage in like passive aggressive behavior or ignoring each other, things like that, that's where things are just going to get worse. You don't resolve it by ignoring it.
Well, of course, it's like holding your breath for a long time, and you hold it, and all of a sudden you're going to explode. So that's kind of the same reality that we see here with conflicts. If you hold in a conflict, now if you're able to express yourself, that's going to help resolve conflicts. Communication is going to help resolve conflicts. So there's certain ways to go about it. I wouldn't hold things in. I would definitely let the other person, your partner or whoever, each other, both of them may have the conflict. They have to let each other know what's going on, because then you can work towards a healthy resolution. Yeah. Now, getting into more of the resolving the problem, because we discuss more of the problem and we briefly discussed resolving the problem, but what can we really do to resolve the issues, the conflicts between couples in relationships?
Well, you know what? I think it's going to be a little different on both the male and female side, because if you think about common conflicts in relationships, right, the way you're going to resolve, let's just say she's mad at you because something you did, right, or she's pissed off at you, something happened, that annoyed her. You're not going to resolve it the same way that she's going to resolve it. So you're going to have to know her, because it's going to depend on the woman, and like it's up to you to understand her needs and how she is. But I would say talking through it is going to be a majority of it, and then at that point you may just have to make it up to her. It depends how bad the issue is. Some conflicts you could just talk right through. Other times you may have to go to the extent of getting flowers or something like that.
Would you say that before you get into the gifts and things of that nature, maybe asking for forgiveness if it's something that you really did wrong, how about just sitting down, giving full attention, eye contact? Do you think also active listening helps?
Without a doubt. And like I mentioned before, once you sit down and have that conversation, your best bet is to just listen. Listen to what she's saying. Like you said, active listening. You're not listening to respond, you're listening to understand.
And I think responding appropriately is very important, because some people, if they don't respond the right way, then the conflict is just going to be ongoing. It's going to keep going. And it's inevitable that there's going to be more conflict in the future, because there isn't an understanding between the two.
Yeah.
At that moment. So you have to try to figure it out. Forget the gifts, forget going outside the box and doing these extra things. Keep it simple.
Yeah.
That's it. Keep it simple, and I think that's the best way to resolve conflicts.
Yeah.
But it's important to always try to find a resolution, because if you don't, what do you do? If there is no resolution, what do couples do?
Yeah. And there's going to be conflicts where there may not even be a resolution. Like if it's just a misunderstanding or an argument, it is what it is. You could resolve that, but like you may have a serious conflict, maybe cheating, or you find out she's talking to somebody else, or she did something this could go on. This could be both on the male or female side. You crossed a line that you shouldn't have in the relationship. Then, you may not be able to talk that through, but I think it's still worth trying though.
Now, nothing is 100% in life. However, is can relationships ever be almost 100% conflict free? Let's say 99.9% conflict free.
I think in a male-female relationship, I think arguments are going to happen more often than not, to be honest with you. Because remember, like you said, women tend to be a little bit more emotional, and they're not emotionally stable. Like remember, women get their period once a month. That's going to be a month that she's going to be a little bit off kilter with her emotions. Sometimes women go hot and cold. One moment they're fine, one moment they're angry because they're hungry or something like that. So I think it's important to just that's a part of women that you just have to understand, that they're more emotional than men are. Men tend to be more quiet. When we're angry, we just kind of go in our corner, do our thing, and we're back to life the next day. Women, I think they have a bigger need to have it resolved.
So I like how you touched base on the men versus the woman aspect. How different do men react versus women? So you touched on it there. Can you go a little deeper
I'll tell you this.
onto it?
Women are going to more likely make bigger deals out of smaller things. We're kind of the opposite. Like if you're in a relationship with a woman, chances are the man's not going to really get that angry or upset until something big happens, right? I mean, I'm trying to even look back at my own previous relationships. I wouldn't get really that upset or angry to the point where I need to sit down and talk about it unless something really big is happening. You think she's cheating, or like she went out and you told her not to, or something along those lines. She lied to you. Those are big problems. So I think men and women get upset over completely different things. So that's another thing to keep in mind.
Let's look at the men for a second. I think that men aren't as open because, of course,
true.
Stoicism. Guys go through life, they endure pain and certain issues that come their way. They deal with it. They figure it out. Right. So when it comes to a conflict, they'll go about it in the same manner for the most part. Do you think guys should be more expressive about things that are happening to be able to not have a headache with
I think you're right. I think that's one of our flaws as males, is that we're kind of used to holding everything in throughout life. Like we're not really, it's not a male thing to do to discuss our problems or to open up about our problems. So like that's why I think women may sometimes get upset with men when they're like they don't talk enough or they don't communicate enough, because I hear that a lot from women, like, oh, I wish men were more open. The idea is not to be emotional, but I think as men, like, we do have to open up to women about problems and resolving them when it happens.
I agree. I don't think the best thing to do as a man is be emotional, because when men are emotional, bad things tend to happen. Fights break out.
Of course.
Really just bad things happen, violence,
right?
And we don't want to see any of that,
right?
We want as much peace as possible in the world between couples. And you tend to see when you go out night out. I mean, of course, we're hustling here, so we're not going out like that, but I'm sure when people are out and about, they see couples all of a sudden arguing, yelling at each other. The guy's taking it, and the woman's just going at him.
Yeah.
What's the best way for a guy to react? Just to keep taking it, or what can he do to get out of that?
You know what? There are going to be times where women get a little bit out of hand, where they get really angry and they may start yelling and stuff like that. I think, hands down, the best thing you could do is stay as calm as possible, because if you think about this for a second. If you let your emotions match hers, that's when that's going to happen.
Do you think it's best for guys to walk away when things are escalating?
Yeah, I think like we started this episode by talking about like sitting down and talking about it. If it ever gets to a point where a woman is throwing things at you, screaming in your face, hitting you, something like that, you have to leave. So don't even stay there and try to figure it out at that point, because at that point she needs time to cool down. You're obviously going to only take so much of it, and if she's getting physical to that point, to me, that's already a deal breaker in the relationship. Once a woman gets physical, I am not arguing with you. I'm not trying to resolve anything. I'm going to calmly leave, and I think that's going to be the end of the relationship, because you don't cross certain lines. If and this goes for both men and women, you never let it get physical. No throwing objects, punching, hitting, anything like that.
Not at all. We don't advocate for any sort of fighting violence, physical violence, none of that at all. And sometimes it happens more or less. Women acting physical with men shouldn't be happening either. They should both back off, cool down.
Should never get physical, ever.
Yeah, it's best for them to just kind of walk away, not necessarily from the relationship, just if they're arguing in that present time, just to kind of walk away,
Yeah.
cool off the best they can.
Because at that point, you're not going to calm her down. And I notice with women, when they get to that extent, by trying to calm them down, you make it worse. It's strange.
I think the guy has to initiate it. The guy has to initiate just walking away. If you're in a public area, just hop in an Uber, go home.
Yeah.
Let her stay. Let her do what she has to do. It's better than it going into something that you can prevent.
Yeah, you have to leave at that point because things can get ugly quick. And the best option, if it ever gets to that point, is to just calmly walk away. Don't even say anything. Just leave. Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because when you have people going out, you have, unfortunately, drugs involved, alcohol involved, other people instigating certain conflicts. And I think that's something where people should watch where they go, who they hang out with, what they do, because when you put yourself in certain situations, you can't avoid conflict. It just falls in your lap.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think that's the best way for people to go about their daily activities. Yes, go out. Yes, have a good time, but make sure you plan accordingly and don't bring your problems outside, right? It's best to deal with things at home before going out and going.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to bring domestic home, problems outside. And I will say this also is like I think some problems like could be easily avoided too. Like I've learned over the years, you don't bring your girl to a club. Don't take her to Miami. Like there's certain things you just can't do because it's gonna create an environment that it's gonna create a tense scenario where you're most likely gonna have an argument. So sometimes it's just better to avoid those scenarios.
I mean, if you end up deciding to go out, because at the end of the day, people go out.
Yeah, of
couples
course.
go out.
Of course.
Married couples go out and things like that. But you have to make sure that things are going to go swell, right? Mm-hmm. What do I mean by that? You go out, you don't put yourself in a situation where things can go downhill. Stay away from the alcohol, stay away from the drugs. Go out, enjoy the time the best you can, but make sure you don't put yourself in certain situations where it could impact your relationship and could create a conflict.
Yeah, good point with the alcohol. That's going to make things even worse. Don't ever argue drunk or under the influence of everything, of anything. If you ever catch yourself where like an argument's about to happen and you're loaded, you're probably better off just cutting yourself off and going home. Yeah.
I mean, for the guys and gals out there, how many times have you gone out and seen a couple arguing?
Those are the worst ones.
Over something silly, and it's because they're drunk, or they're on some drugs. Stay away from the alcohol, stay away from the drugs, and make sure people are going to go out and drink. I mean, there's bars and clubs and things like that. If you do end up drinking, make sure you drink responsibly. Make sure you take an Uber home. Make sure you don't, again, get into stupid fights over nothing and then cause a huge scene, and it's embarrassing too as well.
It could be very embarrassing. If you've ever gotten into an argument in like a public place, it's extremely embarrassing.
I mean, imagine taking that home. You go through a situation like that, you take that home.
Yeah.
How do you look at each other? How does a couple look at each other the same? I mean,
right.
Is it ever normal again, or does it take time to go back to normal?
Yeah, that's why you don't argue. You can't let it get too intense, and you definitely don't want to argue under the influence of anything because you're not in this right state of mind to be having that type of discussion, and you're more likely to get you're gonna have smoke blowing out your ears.
Yeah. So now because we spoke about the men reacting, now the women reacting. What's the best way for them to react to a certain situation? Because the thing is that usually they are the ones that escalate the situation and make the problems worse.
Yeah, it's actually good you brought that up because come to think of it, it's like women, like we said, tend to get emotional, which is okay. It's expected. I would say for women, if there's any women watching, do your best not to let your emotions get out of control. No yelling, like I said, no throwing things like that, because once you take it to a certain level, you're no longer in a let's resolve this conflict mode. Now you're just creating a bigger problem.
Yeah, because there's instances where there's arguments and fights that go viral online. You see them on Facebook, on Instagram, on X, on TikTok, and most of the time it's the woman pushing, creating the issue, magnifying the issue, making it a bigger thing than it really should be. Everyone, man and woman, should be de-escalating, whether it's an issue or a disagreement, a simple disagreement that a man caused. Bring it down, right? Ladies should try to resolve it in a calm way. Vice versa. Lady creates an issue, guy, is upset. Again, should try to both resolve it appropriately. But I see a lot of the time women just arguing and cursing the guy out, hitting the guy. That's where we say guys should walk away because, again, women let their emotions get the best of them.
100%. Over the years, I've had women that I liked, but I had to cut them out because every single argument was psychotic. It was yelling, loud, and sometimes it was over like the stupidest things, So you're not going to have a healthy relationship with somebody like that, whether you're a man or a woman. If the other person is psychotic to that point where you're having frequent, loud, aggressive arguments, you're not going to resolve that.
So there's no way to rationalize, is what you're saying, with somebody like that.
No, you're never going to have a rational, you're never going to resolve a conflict with a person like that. And those type of people tend to be, they might have like a borderline personality disorder. So
bipolar,
emotionally just unstable. So
usually some women use that as an excuse.
Yeah, right.
I ripped you an asshole last night, but not because
my moons were in line with Venus.
I'm actually, I hate you for something, but it's because I had my period or because I'm bipolar, and then today I'm fine now all of a sudden.
It's expected. I think if you have any experience with women, like what comes with the territory. Of course they're going to be emotional. Of course they're going to sometimes argue with you because of the toilet seat or something like that. But it's just like little things like that can be resolved. If they ever get like crazy with you like that, don't stick around and like try to save her or try to pretend like ignore it like it's going to go away, because those could really end up being dangerous relationships.
I mean, guys out there, you can do your best to talk it through, be direct, but you have to pick your battles. You can't just have her cursing you out and going at you, and you try to rationalize it and make it work, but she's not taking it, then you got to just take a break and just leave.
And that's an important quality in people. It's like if you're dating somebody and they can't communicate the issues, right there and then and discuss what it is, that in itself, it's kind of a red flag,
I'm sure it's easier when those couples that don't live together, I'm sure if there's
good point.
There's a couple that's
good point.
Married, that's different. Obviously, they're going to live together, or in a super serious relationship, that's different. But if you're in a couple and you have that situation where that happens, and you're a guy, you live on your own, she lives on her own or with her parents or roommates or whatever, then at least you can get away from it. And would you say maybe give it a few days, a couple days break?
Yeah, I think that's why it's good to live separate, because you at least have that space where, I mean, it's going to depend. It might take a day. It may take a couple days, depending how angry each person got. Look, some people take it to the extent of, if they have like conflicts really often, they'll take it to the extent of seeing like a relationship therapist, and the therapist will kind of like play the middleman and like ask you both questions, get you to both open up and figure the problems out amongst each other. But in my opinion, I mean, unless I was really married with somebody and I was trying to work it out, I wouldn't let it get to that point. If you need to go to see a therapist to figure out your problems, maybe it's not meant to be.
What if ultimately we get to the final stages here, and ultimately you do everything you can, you try to figure out which avenue is best to resolve this conflict, but there's no end in sight. You can't resolve it. Ultimately, there's nothing you can do. What happens to the relationship there?
Something with any conflict, you have to gauge how serious is the conflict. Is it small? Can we just forget about this? Should we sit down and discuss it? Sometimes you may have to talk about it a few different times, but to answer your question, like if the conflict never gets resolved and it's happening often, you're at that point you should probably consider if you should even be with that person. If I had a conflict, constant conflicts with one woman, or if you're a woman watching, like the guy's always giving you a hard time, you're only going to be able to handle that for a certain amount of time. And I like I said, I've had women in the past where like I liked them, but I knew I had to get rid of them because it was just constant problems, constant drama.
Yeah, Rob. I mean, I've been through the same thing. I'm sure many of the guys watching have been through the same thing, and if they say they haven't, they're probably lying, or they haven't dated. I'm sure that's not the case. I'm sure guys have dated. They've dealt with women just creating issues out of thin air.
Correct.
And at the end of the day, we've all been through it at some point. Let's just keep it real. We've all been through it at some point. We have to minimize the issue the best we can. And if ultimately it can't be resolved, then you got to break up. That's it. If you're married, that's a tough one because you risk a lot in divorce. You have alimony, child support, and half your shit that you have to, if you're a man, that you have to give to a woman. So for a guy to break up is tough. For a woman, it may be easy. A woman will have every excuse to get a divorce and take half the guy's shit.
Key takeaways, I think, from this discussion: open, honest, direct communication, number one, and keeping the emotions controlled. And I think with that approach, you can resolve a majority of your relationship conflicts.
Really listen to your partner, understand them, man or woman. Men are simple, so they're not going to try to cause the argument. If anything, they're going to try to solve the problem. Ladies, on the other hand, yeah, you're not going to like this, but because, of course, women are going to say, well, it's the guy's fault. It's the guy's fault. It's not always the guy's fault. You got to look in the mirror. Sometimes it's your fault. You have to take accountability and look at it from a different perspective. If you can do that and you realize that there's a problem that's there that really doesn't need to be a problem, then you could be the one calming things down. It doesn't have to be such a stressful back and forth, ongoing conflict filled situationship. And if it can't be solved, ultimately, got to break up and find somebody else.
Look, at the end of the day, the reason you get into a relationship with somebody to begin with is for them to add to your life, to make your life a little better, to have somebody fun around. If they're bringing hell into your life and it's happening often and you can't communicate it through and you can't resolve it, don't keep that person around.
Don't show contempt for your partner. Don't be in this whole ball of negativity. If that's what's going on.
Some people will stay around just because they're attached, and I've seen both men and women do this where like you're just so attached to that person that like you'll fight, you'll forget about it, you fight again, and then it'll get worse next time, and that's not the way. You got to get rid of that person.
Yeah, it's not healthy physically, emotionally.
That's
mentally.
how you get domestic violence cases and things like that.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, we didn't touch on this, but you can go to whichever psychologist, especially for people that are married,
yes,
therapists, but they can give you recommendations and advice, but they ain't going to solve the problem. You got to figure it out yourselves.
Right.
So, again, last thoughts. Any final statement?
That's pretty much it. Communicate your problems, keep the emotions in check. If you can't resolve the issues and there's too much drama and problems in a relationship, maybe you're better off moving on. So, thank you guys for watching. You want to close us out?
Yeah. Yes. Again, if there's a conflict, solve it. If there's no conflict, it's going to be a happy relationship. So we'll close it out by letting you guys know to help us out. Help us reach 1,000 subscribers, and we'll see you next time. Peace.